Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have a review of the POCO X7 Pro Iron Man Edition. You have to start. Right off the bat, the POCO X7 Pro is one of the most attractive devices you are going to find today, and to see available an Iron Man Edition is even more attractive. Although this edition is slightly more expensive, but honestly, it is still extremely attractive. In Mexico, it has been launched at a price of 7,999 pesos. That's more or less $390. And consider that this Iron Man Edition comes with 12 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage. That's why I insist that it's the most attractive you're going to find for storage and RAM. Anyway, there is a version a little lower with 12 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage in the normal edition at a price of 6,999 pesos, and with 512 gigabytes in the normal edition at 7,499 pesos. Then you were looking at the reference prices in dollars also, just to give you an idea. Although remember very well that the prices here are not the same as over there. Consider that when you purchase this device in the Xiaomi store, you will also be given, in addition to the 1-year warranty, 2 months of YouTube Premium, and also included are some Ready My Buds 6 Play, so you can complement with headphones. So I think it is the most recommended that you will find, although obviously its distribution will be a little more limited compared to its competitors, since in this case it is forced to buy it through online stores, while competitors such as the Motorola Edge 50% Fusion or Galaxy A will have a much more widespread distribution. In fact, speaking of competitors, it is curious that among its competitors is also the little F6, which is also quite powerful, very focused on games too, so I think that will be the main rivalry. Throughout the video, I will tell you some marked differences I noticed between one and the other, so what do you think if we start talking about the design? On the front, there is generally not too much to comment, but being this a device with mid-range price, it should be noted that the bezels are remarkable thin, even the lower bezel, which is usually much larger. In this case, has a relatively low thickness, and in terms of resistance of this front, we will find Gorilla Glass 1, which by its nomenclature could get to confuse a little, but is below Gorilla Glass Victus that integrates the little F6 that is one of its main competitors. On the right side, we will find volume buttons and power button, in this case with a prominent red tone. These frames, by the way, are made of plastic with a matte finish. On the top side, we are going to find grill for the secondary speaker, also infrared for universal remote control, and also microphones. On the left side, we are not going to find any type of port or connector or anything like that, but it is useful for us to tell you that the thickness is 8 and 29 millimeters, so it is not a device that is characterized by being very thin, although it does not bother. At the bottom, we are going to find the tray for the SIM card. In this case, you can place 2 SIM cards. Then we also find microphone, USB-C port, another microphone, and finally the grill for the main speaker. The back cover, of course, that will be the most attractive in this special edition of Iron Man, comes with the symbol of Iron Man in the center. I would have loved for this to also support wireless charging or something, because it hints at that, but it doesn't have that feature. The truth of the matter is that Iron Man fans are going to really enjoy the back design of this device. In the yellow edition, we are going to find the back cover with synthetic leather. So in both versions, we are going to notice that the fingerprints are not going to be marked. The design is very nice, in some areas matte, in some other areas glossy in this edition, and has a weight of 195 grams. But here, the important thing is that it also has IP68. It is resistant to water and dust, something that does not have its main competitor, little F6. And in addition to this Iron Man edition, it is also available in black, green, and yellow. So it also highlights the availability in various colors for you to find your favorite design. So both in aesthetics and in resistance, this device seems to meet perfectly in the price range. Now let me tell you about the screen, which is also spectacular, so let's go a little fast. We find a size of 6.67 inches, very traditional in Xiaomi. The resolution is higher than what we usually find in the average smartphone, as it is a 5K, to be exact, 2712 x 1220 pixels. Although honestly, you are not going to notice that much difference between this resolution and Full HD, but it's always nice to have more, so we're going to find excellent detail level, with this reaching 446 pixels per inch. The texts are gonna look very sharp, and if you're gonna watch multimedia content, you're going to enjoy it a lot through this AMOLED screen, which is going to give us very intense colors, very high contrast. Perhaps in the viewing angles is where it could be slightly below a flagship screen, but the simple fact of being compared this screen with a screen of a flagship model, which can cost 6 times what this device costs, confirms to us that we are in front of an excellent screen. Its refresh rate is 120 Hz, so it will also show very fluid and smooth movements. So at the hardware level, it is an excellent display. In fact, it also has a very high touch sampling, which when you have the game mode activated can go up to 2560 Hz. That is to say that the screen responds very fast to the touch. And with respect to brightness, the highest brightness is quite good to be able to visualize this content perfectly under sunlight. And in fact, it can go up to 3200 nits of brightness when viewing HDR content. It's definitely a completely spectacular display. And with respect to the minimum brightness, we are also going to find a positive experience, not only because of the low brightness display, but also because the dimming rate with which it is able to lower the brightness down to. This level is 1920 Hz, i.e. it will be virtually impossible to perceive some flicker when you have the brightness very low, so the display is very comfortable. Although it does not have extra dimming option as the vast majority of Android devices, but I think you will not miss it since it is a really comfortable screen. Also, as I anticipated, it supports Dolby Vision and HDR content, so there is not much to criticize this screen. It will also offer different color calibration, so if you don't like such saturated colors, you could choose some other. You can manually adjust the color temperature of the display, and even in advanced settings, you can still specifically select the color gamut you want the RGB setting to cover, even the saturation contrast gamma setting. It really is a display that you can completely customize to your liking. In addition, it also brings artificial intelligence features to, for example, improve the detail of the videos that you're going to play. It can also improve the dynamic range of all that content through artificial intelligence. And there is another option to improve how the movement is seen. That is, they are options that we usually see in televisions, now also applied in this mobile screen. That's why I insist that all the parameters of this display are very good. Let's move on now to talk about the sound, and I must tell you that here again it's going to repeat winning formula. We find stereo sound, the main speaker is on the bottom, the secondary speaker has 2 audio outputs for the top, one that is on the frame and one that is in the earpiece area for calls. Generally, most devices have a simple secondary speaker. This is not the case. I was surprised because the secondary speaker sounds good enough if there is a difference between the sound of the secondary speaker and the sound of the main speaker, but it is not as marked as in other models. I really like the stereo experience. Let's listen to a small test, but remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. In addition, in this case through software, we will also find Dolby Atmos and Xiaomi sound with different types of presets and custom effects. But here the interesting thing is that it also has a 10-band graphic equalizer, available for both the speaker and headphones. Then you can customize the sound experience to an even higher level. Personally, I think that with the default equalization it sounds fine, but of course through the equalizer you could make the sound even better. So it sounds even better for each person's taste, so it really has everything we could ask for in that sense. But where we can criticize it is that it does not incorporate headphone jack, although in the price range there are already several devices that do not incorporate headphones, especially when they are more attractive in certain specifications. But being a device that would generally be used for gaming, I think it was a mistake not to have a headphone jack. As much as wireless headsets get better and better, they're still going to have latency, and that makes the gaming experience with headsets not as satisfying. I think that's been a big mistake. If you have USB-C headphones or an adapter, of course you can still use wired headphones, but I think it is a major loss. But if you don't use headphones for gaming, but for listening to music, I think you don't have such a problem because it supports high-resolution codecs like LHTC, aptX, and LDC. So if you buy some headphones that are compatible with these codecs, you are going to be able to enjoy the music in the highest quality. As long as you also have some streaming service with music in this resolution, then if you can enjoy the music in a good way. Regarding the microphones, it's a little strange because it seems to have like 4 microphones. Maybe it has several perforations that are strange. From my point of view, it has 2 microphones, and maybe it has other decorative perforations, or maybe these other perforations are for noise-canceling microphones. It's not very clear. Let's consider that you have 3 microphones. Let's do a test.
Esta es una prueba de los micrófonos integrados de este Poco X7 Pro edición Iron Man.
Now let's put these microphones to the test in a much noisier environment. As I can perceive, if you get to generate some small distortions, but they are not really very serious, and consider that if it was a fairly loud noise that was being played, and consider that if we are playing music at a really loud volume, then without even to recording concerts, I think you're still going to have a good experience. And to finish off with this block, remember that it has a vibration motor on the x-axis. That means that the vibration is perceived much more premium, like a little bump and not as a vibration so simple. In fact, in the same settings of the device, you can determine the level of intensity that will have this vibration when playing. You're going to have a very good experience with this engine. The front camera of this device is 20 megapixels with f-aperture 2.2, fixed focus, and comes placed with a circular perforation on the screen. In this case, we are talking about an Omnivision sensor, but honestly, the front end is simple, admittedly. I think this will be one of its few weaknesses. Overall, the device performs very well in each of the senses, but the front camera remains to be seen not only in photos, but also in video. But before we go to see the results, let's tell a little of the experience. In this case, for a quick launch, you could double press the volume down button and it will immediately launch the camera. Or you could also double press the volume down button, the power button, and in this case, this gesture will work from any screen or any application. So if you're counting on a fast aperture, note that in this case the capture speed is quite fast and snappy, so it responds very well. We will also find a button here for the beauty mode that has different parameters. In fact, it is a lot. You can even modify the hair, the lips, the jaw, well, a tremendous amount of elements, each with its own parameter. Intensity. And we will also find another button where we can select a special filter that we can preview in real time together with the rest of the filters. As for capture gestures, note that if we can select to simply show the palm of the hand or even tap on any area of the screen to be able to take the picture comfortably, even in moments where it is a bit complicated to reach the shutter. This front camera looks a bit simple, the quality is not so outstanding, but if your priority is not selfies, I think you will have good results. It has fixed focus. So if you are too close or too far from the camera, you will be slightly out of focus. You have to be at a very optimal distance. Obviously, you will not get very close details of your face. But notice how the hair area is already in focus, so that's why I say that the focus is a little close, which can give you good results. I was surprised to see a picture with a very low level of detail. Look at this indoor scene, for example. It doesn't have that much detail, although fortunately it is a clean photograph with good color management. In backlight, note that the preview is not optimized, but the processed result does balance the highlights and shadows well. Although in general the color management of this camera is quite simple, at night you will have a good result as long as you are close to a light source. I insist that it handles noise well, since you do not get to see a poor quality photograph even in situations of night backlight. I think the result is good enough. And this would be the result of a portrait photograph at night, which honestly has surprised me for good. It looks with a good enough level of detail, a good quality blur, and good color management. Even in our test during the day, we saw that it does keep objects in focus. something that very few devices are able to do with the front camera. So definitely portrait shots with the front camera are quite good. On the back, we will find two cameras. The main one is 50 megapixels with f-aperture 1.5, autofocus and optical stabilization. And the secondary is a 15mm ultra-wide camera with 8 megapixels on the sensor, f-aperture 1.5 and fixed focus. It is clear that little is not going to focus too much on cameras, photography or video. However, in this case, the main sensor, the truth is that it is quite good. It is a Sony IMX882 that used to be used by some even in the high end, so it is a really competitive sensor. Although the ultra-wide camera, like the front camera, is quite simple, it is not going to give us a very remarkable quality. So although the main camera may have a good quality, I think the rest of the cameras could be considered as a weak point. But before we go to see the results again, let's have an analysis. In this case of the speed note, it responds very quickly. This is really a very attractive point of the device in this price range. I think no other is going to respond this fast, although in this case it has HDR off. If you have auto HDR and you're in some backlit scene, it's probably going to respond a little slower. But it's still very good, and in this case, if you want a burst, you can slide to the side the shutter, and you can take up to 50 pictures, and note that the response in the photograph is quite good. In fact, it anticipates the moment a little bit. In this case, we tried to capture number 3, but the result was even earlier. So we could say that you don't have to worry so much about pressing at the exact right moment, but you have a small time buffer as well. The burst, you will notice that it also responds nimbly, and there is little space between one photograph and another. So if you could manage to extract the exact moment, I like the main camera interface because it has exposure compensation control, which is something that it can be very useful when you're in dark scenarios where suddenly cell phones overexposed to try to get more light. But if you want to keep it dark, you can lower the exposure here, and even though the focus is changing, we're going to be able to keep this locked. We will also find the same button for the beauty mode, but in this case with only one parameter and also the color filters. If we slide to show the menu, we will also find the timer and even the artificial intelligence that by default is turned off. In the top left corner, we also find a button that is for the action mode, which allows you to capture the movements a little more static. It can be useful if you touch on screen, you can adjust the exposure and focus. But if you want something much more professional, you can access the professional mode where you can manipulate the balance. We can also change the white balance, the ISO that can go up to 6400, the shutter speed that can also go up to 30s, the focus, the compensation. Although in this case it does not support photography in RAW, so it confirms that it does not have such a special focus on photos. And with respect to intelligent capture, note that it does not automatically detect documents, but it does have a special document mode where it will automatically crop and also allows you to manipulate the color styles. For example, the ultra-wide camera is designed to optimize the brightness and contrast to make it look like a much more professional scanner, although it does not allow us to add multiple photos to the same document. But at least we can adjust the crop in case it has not been perfect, or delete any note or any stain that has our document, and of course also change the style of color optimization. And with respect to the QR codes, if you are going to recognize them immediately, although there is a very subtle button on the right side that you have to press to be able to do the action of this browser. The ultra-wide camera outdoors shows us that it is quite simple. You see little level of detail, even a little noise is seen in these illuminated environments and chromatic aberration. So it is a fairly simple camera. Obviously the main camera will have a much better level of detail. It is a camera that does have a very good level of quality, and I think that in the price range it can stand up well. However, this device will not be a specialist in cameras. However, the main camera, if you get to take advantage very well, for example. Note that this photograph would have a perspective of 52 millimeters, as if it had a telephoto lens and maintains very well the quality if you get to appreciate the photograph. The camera is very detailed, even applying 2x zoom. So the truth is that this camera is very good. In fact, in this case, even I would have liked that they did not put ultra-wide camera. And with the panoramic mode, you can see that we are going to find a very good quality of photography. It has good sharpness, it has high resolution. So the panoramic mode would fulfill the function of an ultra-wide camera quite well. Although he knows that indoors, the ultra-wide camera curiously doesn't suffer as much, the result seems to me to be positive. The main camera in this case is going to have a little more contrast and good detail, but also has good behavior indoors, and even applying zoom 2x, we still see a very good result. Interestingly, at night, the ultra-wide camera has a better white balance, since in this case we had warm light, and indeed with this camera we get that result. If you use the night mode, there won't be too much difference from the automatic mode, so I don't recommend using it as much. With the main camera you can see that we gain much better light input, much better detail, but the white balance is not as accurate as it was in reality because, as I say, we had warm light. But without considering the white balance, the rest of the characteristics of this photograph is quite good if it has a little noise present in the more. I'm not sure if it's a dark area, but honestly that doesn't affect the final result too much. And with the night mode, you notice that in this case it will handle a little better the noise with the main camera. It doesn't disappear completely, but I think it finds a good balance between controlling noise and still maintaining a good level of detail even in these darker areas. The camera will undoubtedly make it versatile. In darker areas where there is no direct light source, we are going to see a good result with the ultra-wide camera. The color doesn't look very good to me. The main camera improves the color a bit, although it takes away the warmth of the original scene. But what I like most about the main camera is how well it controls the dark areas. There are other devices that put too much light in the dark area, however. This one seems to me to do an excellent job in terms of light management. If you zoom in 2x at night, you're not going to get as much detail as we saw in the daytime, but I think it performs. So 1000 empeña. Okay, now let's show specifically the full range that this device has zoom range, as it will be able to go all the way up to 10x. In this case, you're looking at zoom 4x, and the truth is that it has very good quality in terms of the detail that manages to take advantage of this sensor at the maximum. Obviously, you don't have an ultra detailed image anymore, but believe me, for this price point and for the distance we were at, it's a zoom that really gets a lot of attention. In backlit scenarios, notice that the preview is considerably well optimized and the photography is also of very good quality. Notice that it keeps the balance of highlights and shadows well. Does not overexpose the shadows too much. There are no burnt areas. For the price, I think it meets very well, even applying a little zoom. Note that still has good balance of lights and shadows, and with the ultra-wide camera we still have a positive result. Although, as I said, this camera has a much simpler lens, so it can get to reveal a little more chromatic aberration in some areas, but overall I think it is a positive camera. For macro photography, also the main camera is going to perform well, especially if you apply 2x zoom. Because look at the good level of detail that you could reach, even without having any camera specialized in this type of photography, and if you are in good lighting conditions, even photos with movement are going to come out well defined enough. The device has a high resolution mode on its camera to take advantage of the full resolution of the sensor, however. Although the photo, if you have that resolution, it is not well translated in terms of the detail that you can notice in the photo by applying zoom, so this would be one of the sections where it should improve. And finally, for portrait photography, it also has a good performance. Note that in this case, it is with the traditional perspective of 26 millimeters, but it also allows you to have this perspective of 52 millimeters or so, a telephoto perspective that gives a more professional look to portraits. Right off the bat, that's a good thing, because in the price range, there are other devices that don't allow you to photograph with this telephoto perspective, and it also has good edge pit detection. You don't see cloudy edges. The blur generated in the background is also nice, so it takes good portraits. For video recording, it should be noted the maximum compatibility it has in its resolution, as it is 4K at 60 frames per second, something very difficult to find in the price range. Although, of course, only the main camera will be able to get up to this quality. In fact, the other two cameras record in a much simpler way. But before we look at the results, let's look at the experience. Notice that to change the resolution setting, you have to go by clicking once on this quick shortcut, although you could also more easily enter the menu to change the setting directly. We will also find a shot steady mode for a little more stability, which we will see in a moment. And we also have an option to keep some objects in focus and even a teleprompter option, something useful for content creators that is not normally available on other devices. I've only seen this on Xiaomi devices. In the video recording interface, we are going to find a button to apply the portrait bokeh effect, which we will see in a moment. We also have the same exposure control that we saw in photography, which can become very useful. We also find a beauty mode, although in this case it is not compatible with 4K resolution, but only with full HD resolution. Then we will also find the color filters, where exactly the same thing will happen with respect to the resolution when recording video. Note that we will find a button to pause our clip, although it could get a little confusing. Also another button to take pictures, and we have the zoom ring, also quite convenient. And there is a small flag in the upper right corner that will simply help us to create a bookmark so that later, when we finish recording the video and want to play it back, we have a shortcut to the highlights by clicking on this flag. So if while you were recording you notice something very specific, you can bookmark it. However, you can't turn on the flashlight while recording nor rotate to the front camera to do these actions. You need to stop your video recording. But note that within Pro mode, video mode is also available, so it's remarkable that you have this ability to record even in 4K, with full manual controls to manipulate white balance, focus, shutter speed, or even ISO. So you have very good options, and definitely in this price range it's hard to find something like this. The ultra-wide camera records in a very simple way in full HD at a low bit rate. You see little detail, a lot of chromatic aberration. So as I was telling you, in this case it applies a better browser. In photography it is solved by using the panoramic mode. In video you would lose amplitude. But the reality of things is that this camera only offers you amplitude, that the rest is very simple. On the other hand, the main camera improves a lot if it is compatible with 4K, has good color management, good contrast, no serious chromatic aberration is seen at any time. You even see the video at a higher rate of bits per second, so you see well-defined movements. The video recording really seems to me to be of good quality with the main camera. You don't see any aggressive jumps in the exposure, you don't see any problems with the focus, so it performs perfectly well. In this, indoors, the ultra-wide camera is going to suffer a lot. It has quite a lot of noise generated by there. The contrast seems to me a bit higher than the account, and in general the quality is not so good. The main camera handles noise and contrast better, although it seems to me that the colors are slightly oversaturated in this type of scenarios with intermediate light. Overall, it is clear that it will not be a specialist in all this. Note that in backlighting, the ultra-wide camera seems to me that it behaves well enough balancing highlights and shadows when there are faces. Although you do get to see quite a lot of chromatic aberration in some areas, and if the face is a little closer, you will notice some areas more overexposed than others. The main camera definitely has a better performance. It balances very well light and shadow. In fact, it does so remarkably high, although if you get to perceive a little, it does show some jumps in the exposure when the position of the face changes, but nothing really serious. The quality seems to me very good for the price of this device. At night, the ultra-wide camera will suffer a lot. In the darkest areas, there is a lot of noise. The brightest areas are overexposed. In general, the result is too basic. The main camera also suffers with respect to noise in the darkest areas, although it exposes the brightest areas slightly better. But in this particular case, it is very noticeable that it is not yet a very specialized device in these aspects. Fortunately, when there is no strong lighting area framed in the video, we will find a better result even if there is enough darkness. But as I say, if there are areas of lighting present, the video can lose a lot of quality. As far as stabilization is concerned, the ultra-wide camera does perform very well. See how it does when walking and even when running. The movements are perfectly well balanced and compensated with the main camera. Having a slightly closer perspective, you can get to notice a little more movements both when walking and running. Although it tries to compensate, but for action scenes would not be advisable to record with this device, since the ultra-wide camera is the one that has better stabilization behavior. But its image quality is very simple. The device also has a mode called Shut Steady that is supposed to help you, although the resolution drops to full HD. Then again you lose image quality, and anyway you also notice these small vibrations when running with a lot of action, so I do not recommend much to record this type of scenes. Regarding the zoom management, unlike photography where it takes advantage of the information of the sensor perfectly well, in this case you see a much more detailed image, but in this case the image is not very good. It is blurry, lacks a lot of sharpness, and in fact the maximum zoom is just 6x. The focus does seem to react quickly in aggressive movements. Even in more subtle movements, it also seems to be adjusting this focus correctly. Interestingly, this device incorporates a portrait recording mode, something that very few devices of this price are able to offer. And the truth is that it does quite well. The depth detection is positive, although it does not change the intensity of the blur. If the person is very far away, then it is not so professional result, but curiously, if it is able to keep focused objects, something that even several high-end devices are not able to do. Therefore, we conclude that it is a fairly advanced portrait recording mode, although in full HD. However, for the price range is completely positive. As for slow motion, you have several options, some of them in HD, but also in full HD at 120 frames per second, which we say is a basic slow motion, but it comes out well. You could also go up to 240 frames per second, which is slower and still in full HD. So for the price range, I think you have a good quality slow motion. Even in this case, allows you to get to 960 frames per second, still in full HD, although at the time of recording is a bit complex. There are moments where it is out of focus, plus only the final part of the video is the one that appears slow, so it is a bit complicated to press the exact moment to record it correctly. Since it does not resume at normal speed in the final part of the video, so the result looks a little strange, but if you have patience, you could achieve good results. Finally, in terms of fast motion, we did find good settings with case stabilization, so you could perfectly well record movements. Indoors, you will notice that it tries to raise the saturation of the colors to make it look more attractive, but it seems to me that it is a good quality. A good result adjusting the speed in 4x, or you can go up to 1/800x, with which recording landscapes will also be something spectacular, and as I say, also come stabilize the scene. I had already anticipated that the front camera was quite simple in photography, and in the video is confirmed. Fortunately, it has good stabilization, but the resolution is only full HD, so it is not so advanced. You will also notice that it does not have a good dynamic range, since in backlit scenes, it will give total priority to illuminate the face, and everything else will be completely burned. But the simple fact that it does not let you record in 4K with the front makes us confirm that it is not a device that wants to give much emphasis to the recording with the front camera. Indoors, you will notice that it tries to raise the saturation of the colors to make it look more attractive, but it seems to me that it is a bit too high. It's a bit of an overkill, plus you see a bit more noise, although the lighting controls it well. However, at night, if you are going to notice a very bad result with much more noise present. Even a gelatinous effect is generated at the edges of the video, the result is seen at a very low rate of beads. This is where it is most noticeable that it is a device that does not have a special focus on photographs or video recording. You need to be in well-lit environments if you want to have a good result with this camera. And there's creative tools if you have the fast camera mode with the stabilized front camera. So it is positive and also has a slow motion mode at 120 frames per second that you could use in some creative scenes. Finally, it also has the dual recording mode, so you can show both the front camera and the rear camera, which is useful for bloggers or something like that. But the level of detail used in the front-facing camera when recording with this device is pretty straightforward. The funny thing is that it does let you switch modes between a picture-in-picture mode, a split-screen mode. It also lets you reposition the rectangle with the bounce effect, which is attractive. Although you can't resize this little rectangle, but fortunately note that if it is well implemented, as the focus does react and also lets you zoom in, so it is a considerably good mode, although it does not have so much detail, but in usability I think it offers everything we could ask for. You could also set the front camera to full size and the rear camera to small size, although to do this you need to first go through the split screen mode. So in that sense, perhaps the experience would have to be perfected. But overall, it is very good, and even has the portrait recording mode in the camera front, and honestly, it looks very good. The generated blur effect looks nice. It has stabilization. It does not have a great behavior against backlight, but honestly, that the result is good. It even keeps objects in focus. Something quite curious, I do not think the 100% of the time, but its performance, the truth is that it is nice in this type of recording. This could be a very strong point, since in the price range there will not be many devices with this capability. As for software, you're gonna take you also a good surprise, since we find HyperOS in its version 2.0, that is, it is based on Android 15, is excellent news. It already comes factory updated and also has the promise of receiving 3 years of software updates, 4 years of security patches. That is, it is an excellent policy for this price range. You're still not free of some notifications that seem more advertising than notifications, and in some areas of the system you will probably still see advertising. But it is the price to pay for having a device this tight in price. As you may notice, this edition of Iron Man comes with a custom theme that I personally don't like because it looks just splashed with color. There are several app icons that don't fit this theme. But fortunately, it's something you can change. So in the customization section, we're going to find perfectly access to different styles, themes, and much more, so you can completely change the style of your device Note that there are many themes that you can install, and as I say, within the themes that already come default is the Iron Man. But we will also find others a little more traditional and conservative, depending on what you prefer. As you can see, when applying a theme appears more advertising, then I insist that advertising is likely to keep seeing it everywhere in the system. But come on, to apply the Iron Man theme to stay in the traditional style of the device. And having Hyperos, note that you also have different selections for the lock screen. You can create your own customizations with depth detection. With different font styles, the truth is that the specific customization of the lock screen is very advanced. You can select your own photos or load some that are already predetermined and has a very good variety of watch styles and more covers, so the lock screen you're going to enjoy it a lot. We will also find the always-on display mode, where we have different covers with digital and analog clocks. There are even phrases that you can place for when you have locked the device, and as I say, you can also change some things, icons, fonts, even the effects of notifications to illuminate the edges of the screen when you receive a notification and you have a good selection of wallpapers. You're also going to find different gestures to take advantage of the device. For example, call the voice assistant by holding down the side button. In this case, you can set Gemini. You can also take a screenshot with 3 fingers down or even pressing a combination of buttons. We also have the function to quickly run the camera or even to turn on the flashlight if you want to use the same gesture. Though this gesture conflicts with the one to open the camera, so you must choose which option you prefer. We will also find the floating ball that allows you to have a navigation also more comfortable. In this case, with a menu that can be deployed on this button. Although note that the mode of use of one hand only going to adjust the content vertically, something that I personally do not like, and in fact it is quite complicated to activate this gesture with one hand. So, from my point of view, it's not as functional because you don't reach the whole screen. This device also includes the option of floating windows that you can open through the side menu. Note that when you click on them, they run in this format. You can also resize them, and in this case, you can open up to 2 apps in this type of window. Note that in this case, Instagram if available, but YouTube, unfortunately, you can't run it in this fluid format. Obviously, you can also adjust to change the format if you want split screen or if you want floating window, and you can also minimize them by clicking them to the side, or even at the top you can restore them in a traditional format. And you can also transform them directly from the recent apps view, so there is a good way to use these windows, but this sidebar is going to be adapting. When you're in games, it will show you other options that you will see later. But for example, if you're in a video application, you will also see some options such as record screen, take screenshots, project, and even activate artificial intelligence subtitles or rescale the content to make it look sharper. In addition to changing the style of color rendering and also the style of movement in the images. You can also have Dolby Atmos and direct access to surround sound options, all from this little sidebar. So in video, you can also take advantage of it, and note that in video calling applications, a special panel is also enabled in this sidebar. For example, to turn on a little more intensity in the light to illuminate your face. We also find an option to reduce noise with the microphone, and there is also the option to interpret that is part of the options. Artificial intelligence of this device, so that you speak in one language and other people hear you in another language. We would also find the option of artificial intelligence subtitles, and finally an option that says camera between devices. But this would work if you have another compatible Xiaomi device to use its camera instead of your camera. Interestingly, this device retains this feature to take advantage of the optical fingerprint reader to recognize heart rate. Then you could also have this option available here. And interestingly, there is also a business mode which I hadn't seen before on Xiaomi. Although this is obviously going to be much more focused on business use, so you can have some other things like managing usage time and more. In the gallery, remember that you can press and hold on any image with text to extract this text digitally, which is convenient, or you can also crop people directly to copy it. In the clipboard, or even save it or send it, then it could also become a way to try to send a kind of stickers, although it knows that in reality it will not be a sticker, but a cropped image that does not look so attractive. Obviously, you can also select several pictures to be able to create a collage, a video, or even have some automatic editing option. And we will also find the art section where you can select some style in which you want to transform to your photograph, very similar to the effects that we see on the lock screen. So just wait a little bit of time for it to do the necessary transformation of these photographs. With regard to artificial intelligence, this device surprises because usually in this price range we do not find implementations of this style. It has virtually the entire suite of options of Xiaomi artificial intelligence. For example, a summarized text, although not. The only thing that this suite does not have in this suite is portraits with artificial intelligence. In the description, I leave you a link where you can know the full suite of artificial intelligence of Xiaomi, as there are many functions. What should be said, nothing more, is that virtually all of them will require internet connection. So it does not have artificial intelligence capabilities by itself, but in Xiaomi's collaboration with Google and other companies, if they are able to offer you some smart features, among them also access to Gemini like all Android devices, although it does not have Circle to search. With regard to security, we will find an optical fingerprint reader integrated into the screen. The fact of being optical means that it needs a strong illumination to be able to recognize your fingerprint. In this case, it supports a maximum of 5 registrations, and you should know that in the settings you can change the animation with which your fingerprint is recognized, and you could also select if you want the illumination. Not to be so strong when you are in dark scenarios. In addition, you can have some shortcuts when unlocking, simply staying with your finger on the screen to open this menu, although it only shows 2 options and you cannot add more shortcuts. Facial unlocking will also be available, but it is not in 3 dimensions, so it is a pretty simple unlock, so it is not so recommended. This device also features smart unlock via Bluetooth devices, so if you're connected to a Xiaomi wristband, watch or headphones, it could stay unlocked. Inside the file manager, we're also going to find a secure folder. Just swipe down inside the apps view. You can use a recent password to open this folder. You can use a different pattern from your lock screen and obviously your fingerprint. Here you can store any private file, and in this case it does not integrate a child mode. However, the second space is integrated. That is, you can use a lock pattern to enter the first space. One different pattern to enter the second space, and this second space will have its own files and its own applications. As you can see, in this case we have nothing installed in the second slot. So let's say you can have 2 phones in one. We will also find the possibility of enabling the application lock so that with fingerprint you have to authorize when entering certain applications of your choice. There is also the option of dual or cloned applications to use 2 instances of these in the same phone. And within the security application, we're also going to find a scanner against malware with Xiaomi's own development. It has no collaboration with some other cybersecurity companies. But at least it incorporates some additional technology to Google Play Protect. In this case, we do not find child mode or a private VPN from Xiaomi, but obviously it also has the rest of Android security features, with the exception of extended unlock. In the description, I leave you another video where you can go to know each of these security options that Google offers for Android devices. Let's go talk about the battery. In this case, its capacity is 6,000 milliamperes, and it might surprise you, in fact. If you just read the specifications, you could say that it practically crushes any other device in the range. However, I think it is not as spectacular as it should be, in fact, if you compare it with the battery life that its brother had. The little F6 with 5,000 milliamp battery, you will notice that it performed even less time. In my close-up drain test, it reached 4 hours with 26 minutes, while its sibling with smaller battery supposedly reached almost 5 hours, and in my close-up test it reached 4 hours with 40 minutes, while its sibling reached almost 5.5 hours. So it is clear that the battery is not that it is bad, but consider that it is a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. Do not consider that it has 6,000 milliamp hours, because otherwise you will be a bit disappointed. Of course, having a powerful processor, if you demand a lot, it will consume a lot. If you do much simpler tasks, you will surely find that the battery lasts long enough. In any case, remember that there is the normal saving mode and the ultra saving mode that you could use either for everyday or emergency occasions if you need to prolong the battery as much as possible. It must be said that supports 90 watts charge, although the Ironman edition does not bring charger included. That seems to me a blunder. But I did the test with a 90 watts charger from Xiaomi, to see what it was capable of. And in the load, if we are going to notice something positive, in 15 minutes it reached 42%. The truth is very good. In 30 minutes it reached 69%, and the full charge finished it in 45 minutes. This, as I say, charging from 0 to 100, which is a practice that I do not recommend you to do. You know that to take care of the battery life, it is best to charge it from 15 to 80 or 85, so your charging times, I think, will not be very long. And as you can see in the graph, even though they support 90 theoretical watts, in reality, they do not actually use 90 watts more than a peak at the beginning, as fast charging usually behaves. But in any case, they maintain a good power throughout the whole charge. That is why they end up charging in less than 50 minutes. So that's good. What we are not going to find here, and we can't claim it for the price, is wireless charging or reversible wireless charging. But to take care and protect the battery, if it has smart charging, that will learn your routine to charge slowly at night, or also charge lock in case you need to leave the device plugged all the time to the current, so it is not overcharging the battery. Let's move on to connectivity, where again it doesn't disappoint. We are going to find support for 5G and Wi-Fi 6 to achieve very high download speeds, and even through software you can manage which applications will be. Allow that they connect to the internet with your mobile data, and which applications are definitely forbidden to avoid unwanted consumption. We are even going to find Bluetooth 6.0 or something I had not seen on any mobile device. It is the first that I get with this technology, which is going to offer you obviously more stability, more range, but it also has protocols too, more security. It even allows you to detect distances and more advanced things that we will surely be seeing that other accessories start to implement in the future. Let's say that this one is ahead of the future, because there are still not many products that take advantage of this new version of Bluetooth, but it is ready. We will not find FM radio, but if we can connect accessories through the USB-C port, and we also have wireless screen projection, both in mirror-only format and in a slightly more advanced format that would allow you to hide some notifications and things you do not want to appear on the projected screen. Of course, it's compatible with Android Auto. And with respect to sensors, we're going to find field sensor, geomagnetic orientation, gyroscope sensor, but unfortunately, the proximity sensor is virtual. That is another point where we could get to complain about the experience, which may not be as optimal, but it does include the rest of sensors such as gravity sensor, linear acceleration, and many more. In that sense, it does not disappoint, and even remember that it also has infrared to work as a universal remote control in any brand of TV, just configure it. So it has very good connectivity capabilities. I think there are just a few very specific things that are disappointing or considered weak points, but overall, it's very good. Xiaomi's ecosystem has been improving a lot in terms of the interaction of its devices, because in the number of devices, it always had enough strength. It has lots and lots of accessories, watches, bracelets, headphones, tablets, you name it, and even home devices that you can connect through the Xiaomi Home app. So a number of devices we have never had any complaints. The complaint was in terms of the interaction there was, but it has been improving quite a bit so that we could already have shared clipboards as long as we have recent Xiaomi devices or with the most recent updates. You could even have a director mode so that from a tablet you can see the camera of this cell phone and control the videos even in multi-camera and various advanced stuff. So I think in this sense the ecosystem experience is getting better, although Xiaomi laptops still don't have a distribution in many countries. So I think if they want to perfect their ecosystem, they should also sell their laptops with advanced interaction between them. For now, the ecosystem is perceived well, but it is not as its greatest strength, as it still depends on Google in several things. And in fact, Xiaomi has abandoned certain things in favor of Google. In this case, it still incorporates Xiaomi Share for file sharing, but it also has quick share from Google for cloud storage. It does not have Xiaomi Cloud as in China, but they bet on Google Drive. Although fortunately for home devices, if they have their own application that I already mentioned, and even have their own app store called App Mall, which obviously you will not use it too much, but at least it gives you the feeling that it is not so dependent. Google in case something bad were to happen to them. Let's go now to our traditional test of opening applications. This device incorporates the MediaTek Dimensity 8400 Ultra processor, accompanied by 12 gigabytes of RAM LPDDR4X, and in fact offers you more virtual RAM, and remember that it also has a tremendous storage capacity, UFS 4.0, so it integrates everything you need to have the maximum possible speed and ready. As you see, it has taken more or less 2.3 seconds on average to open. Each application, that is, it matches the performance of a full flagship, so we are not going to find a slow experience or anything like that. Now watch, let's see if the apps keep running or not. It looks like it's updating the app every time I enter it, but actually I think if it's having a good background app run, watch, there it is. It's got 12 gigabytes of RAM, so we wouldn't expect any less, but watch, we're already seeing. The first reboot, so it seems that it is not able to keep the 116 applications open at the same time, but it seems that a lot of them. Then you should not have too much trouble while you have several things running, just that in this case you do not notice that supposedly has virtual RAM memory with a tremendous capacity. Or notice that it supposedly incorporates an additional 6 gigabytes of virtual RAM by default, but in the settings you can supposedly up to another 12 gigabytes of virtual RAM, but not really working. So supposedly it would have 18 gigabytes of RAM, but I insist that it does not get to notice too much. As there are times where if we see some reboot, although there are exceptions, most of the time we will notice that the device maintains a smooth execution of each of these applications that we have open. In storage, Xiaomi has done something strange since this version is 512, but somehow they have managed to add another 16 gigabytes, which comes in handy because the system uses a good part of this storage, but you still have too much space to store a lot of games, which is what you're mainly going to run here. Supposedly it's 4.0 VFS storage, but note that in reality the read speed doesn't quite keep up with what you'd expect. In fact, it falls a bit short. So oddly enough, the storage doesn't seem to be that fast. And with respect to typing, I think it falls a bit short of expectations. Although in typing, I think it's normal to see this speed. But what do you think if we see this applied in real life? That is, we are going to export a video where the processor, RAM and storage are used. In this case, remember that it is a video recorded in 4K with this device with total duration of 1 minute. It's 4 clips stitched together and that's it. It took only 15 seconds. It's raw power. Definitely that this device is going to offer us something excellent in terms of performance. It behaved even better than flagships that cost a hell of a lot more expensive. Regarding games, you know that Xiaomi does strange things. So within the security application that has nothing to do with games, there is access to Game Turbo, which is actually called Game Space. Finally, here we are going to be able to manage all the games that we have installed, and we can even manage the performance that the device is going to have individually for each game if we want more quality or more power. Saving. In addition, we can customize specifically the GPU. In this case, for example, we could say the maximum frames per second it would be able to reach, the maximum quality of textures and other things. So definitely that has good options, but I don't know why they are hidden inside the security suite. In the settings, you can also enable Game Turbo, which will give us more options in the sidebar, which I'll show you in a moment. There are shortcuts also that you can enable or disable and customize a little bit the high performance mode with respect to exceptions that you don't want it to clear from the RAM memory, or also to the Wi-Fi control and some things to avoid interruptions when entering a game. Notice that we are going to have here the sidebar by default is going to enable Wild Boost, which will give us maximum power in this gaming mode. You can also go back to balance mode if you want, and as you can see here, you can clear the memory or adjust more specifically the performance that this device is going to have during this game. We would also find quick shortcuts to open applications in floating window format so as not to interrupt our gameplay. And we also have options to do not disturb, take screenshots in image, screenshots in video, or also access wireless screen projection, modify things from the Wi-Fi, even access the brightness of the screen directly here, and also modify the style of the notifications, since it notes that by default the notifications could get a little bit USAN more than the account. But when we enable this option, the notifications will now look different. Notice how it will simply scroll the text along the screen, although it is not displayed in full, but it gives you an idea, so you choose how you want the notifications to be displayed. And finally, we access voice modifiers if you want your voice to sound deeper or higher pitched, and we will also find the timers useful for some games. In Call of Duty, by default, gives us the very high quality at a maximum rate. Note that we could also go up to a maximum graphics quality, and in the case of ultra rate, the graphics quality is set to a medium level. It does not go down to the minimum, so it is outstanding. First, we are going to test giving priority to the graphic quality, so you can observe that it does have support for different effects, something that we could practically only ask of a flagship. So here it gives you everything you need to play with this configuration. The performance was excellent, very good stability. We see virtually no low peaks even with this configuration of many graphics. But the highlight is that the screen recordings by default are with the same resolution of the screen, which you know is higher than Full HD, but 24 frames per second. However, for testing, we went up to 60 frames per second recordings, and still the performance was remarkably high. Note that the device does not stay at the same resolution as the screen. We had no freezing at any time. Even recording gameplays with the highest quality, and the temperature control was quite good. Then we gave priority to the refresh rate and managed to reach up to 90 frames per second with virtually no low peaks, as the minimum that comes down is 85%, and again with good temperature control. So it is definitely one of the best options for those looking for a fairly fluid gaming without sacrificing graphics. Remember that in this case, Xiaomi has incorporated something they call While Boost Optimization 3.0, which is supposed to improve performance and everything else, and the truth if it is reflected in real life. Although it obviously has a very powerful processor with top specifications, but at least at the software level, it is seen that if they take advantage of all these components, then we played Legends. In this case, obviously for the price would play something very low, but we put it a test. The processor has a very good performance, the flagship Ultra to 60 frames per second, and again the result is extremely good, 59 frames per second on average. The lowest peak was 42. The temperature is below 40 degrees Celsius. The truth is nothing to reproach. It is a device that behaves really very well when playing in conjunction with a good screen, one good sound. You will enjoy the gaming experience a lot. Then we played PUBG. Also note that by default gives us the HD quality at a high rate. For the test we went up to Ultra HDR at an ultra rate and again behaved quite well, 40 frames per second with this configuration. Giving priority to the graphics, and the truth is not much more to say. The game looks well adapted. This processor has very great capabilities for the execution of these contents. Then we played giving priority to the refresh rate, i.e. an ultra extreme rate, although with the lowest graphic settings. And again we saw the very good experience, 118 frames per second on average. So if you like to play with this experience of ultra fluid movements, you can notice it on this device. Plus again, the temperature was controlled very well. In this case, it incorporates the 4th generation of Xiaomi's cooling system called Liquid Cool. That integrates several things to try to cool the processor. Supposedly they have improved the thermal conductivity compared to other vapor chambers. It also incorporates an ultra-large 5000 square millimeters loop pump, so you have gas and liquid flowing in separate channels to try to transfer all the heat from the processor to the outside, and boy does it show. The device really cools in an excellent way without the need for a red magic style fan. Then we played Henshin Impact. By default it gives the medium graphics quality, but to put it to a very demanding test, we selected the very high quality at 60 frames per second. We turned up the quality of the effects and the blurring, so it's a completely flagship test, and what a pleasant surprise we got. It's a device that performs really very well. The lowest peak was 56 frames per second, so you realize how well it's able to handle everything. Game content while recording the screen. If you could get to have some peaks a little more marked, but obviously we are in front of the highest possible graphics settings on this device, so it's going to run too well. On this device, and again with excellent temperature control. Consider that we selected the highest possible graphics quality and it got up to 42.4 degrees Celsius on the outer lid, so I was really impressed. I think that in this price range you will not find something better for gaming. Then we played War Thunder, a game with ray tracing. So note that in the graphic quality we selected the maximum possible. We went up to 120 frames per second to see what it was capable of, and obviously we turned on ray tracing to have the most complex graphic configuration, and the experience was really good. Although it did not reach 120 frames per second, so far most devices have been able to reach 120 frames per second. Runs similarly, it runs smoothly, it doesn't feel too jittery, and again the temperature is well controlled. In fact, it gives us an experience, as I tell you, very similar to what the flagships give us. So it is completely remarkable that in this mid-range price range, you can have a flagship performance. Definitely the most attractive point of this device will be the performance it is able to achieve. It is simply spectacular. We then played Car X Street and note that in this case several parameters are at level 4, but again we went to select the highest possible on all settings, just to see what it was capable of. Obviously this setting we would only put on a flagship, and it seems that this game was a little more difficult for it because there was a little more jitter, let's say more jitter, but still the lowest peak of 27 is still considerably smooth. Taking into account the tremendous graphics quality that we put in the test, definitely that this device gives us a very high performance. Obviously, if you want to play with much more fluidity this content, you would have to select a slightly lower graphics. But for the price we wanted to put this test so complex a notes that even the temperature controlled it perfectly well with 41.9 degrees Celsius on the outer cover. So it definitely confirms us that it is an excellent gaming device. And finally, we played Sendless Zone Zero. In this case, it is set to low quality by default, but we set it as high as possible. Every parameter, we turned it all the way up with a high resolution smoothing in shadows, and we turned it up to 60 frames per second as well. And again, we noticed excellent performance. Everything goes very smoothly, movements feel smooth, all animations are also reproduced perfectly well, again with a very good control. Positive temperature. So that confirms us the excellent choice that is this device when playing. In conclusion, it is definitely an ideal device for those who want to play at this price. You will not find something better. The performance is very high, it won't be stuck, it will allow you to play in very high resolutions, and in this case does not sacrifice too much the rest of the features. And it has good resistance, incorporates Gorilla Glass, incorporating IP68, has an excellent screen, excellent sound. Only in the cameras is where it possibly comes to be some sacrifices, but the main camera comes out quite well. Where it sacrifices is a little more in the front camera and the ultra-wide camera, but the rest of the features seem to me very good. In the description, remember that there is the purchase link in case you want to buy it in the official Xiaomi store, since that is one of its biggest obstacles. The distribution is a little short, but let me know in the comments what you thought of this device. For now, this has been all for this video. If you liked it, you know you can indicate it, and see you next time.